Okay, so today we're going to be looking at chapter 3. And of course, chapter 3 is where we are going to be paying attention to the leadership model. Once. Did somebody else just arrive in the classroom?
No, sir, just me. Having connectivity issues, so I'm using two devices.
2 devices. Okay, thank you for the update. Okay, so today what we're going to do in this chapter is that we're going to go into a fair amount of detail with the relational leadership model. That's what this presentation is going to be all about. So in this chapter, we're going to present it, and you guys would try to grasp the ideas and see if it appeals to you, as the text would say, to be a model that you will consider in the building of your own leadership philosophy um, and actions in the future. All right. Now, as with anything, this model positions itself on the focal point of looking at the relationship that we develop between leaders, between the leaders and the followers. All right. And in fact, it focuses on that role because it sees it as probably the most pivotal aspect of the entirety of the exercise. So therefore, leadership is inherently a relational communal process. And it is always going to be dependent upon the context in which it's being established. So leadership, for example, in formal places like at a job site and stuff like that, will be distinctly different to leadership practices that are in a more informal environment. Let's say if you're in a club or that type of stuff. So you'd find out, or you should be able to realize that context plays a very important part of that aspect of how it's being conducted. And further, it is something that we have to take in consideration, especially if we want to bring to bear positive changes in the way in which leadership is practiced in this country, especially in the areas of employment and in the service that we all work in. So if we remember carefully, the definition for the relational leadership model of leadership is that leadership is a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. So we have to remember this definition. The definition then puts us into the focal point of the concepts that we're going to be looking at. So relational leadership involves focus on 5 primary components. So the RLM model is purposeful and builds commitment towards positive purposes that are inclusive of people and diversity of points of view, empowers the involvement of other people, is ethical, and recognizes that the 4 of these elements are accomplished by being process-oriented. So the key elements that we're taking out here is purpose, inclusivity, empowerment, ethicals or ethical behavior, and process orientation. So this is a visual representation that you could find in the textbook that tries to put the model
Morning,
into
sir.
a. Yes, sir. Good morning. Who's this?
Sorry for the late
Hamilton.
entry. Hamilton here.
Okay, Hamilton, no worries. Thank you. All right, so this image here is looking at the entire process of purpose, inclusivity, empowerment, and ethical behavior, all being couched in a process-oriented methodology that we're going to utilize across the board. So this is a visual image of the model that we're going to be looking at. Now, it does not speak to describe the way leadership is currently practiced, but it tries to set up an ideal or aspirational model that we can hopefully move towards or influence our movement towards that type of behavior. Why we want to do that? Because the model sees itself as being one that is healthier for our society, more ethically grounded, and more effective in working with other people and groups and so on. The framework connects these five key elements that serve as a responsive approach to leadership. All right, so let's start to get into it. So the first aspect is the purpose. And if we understand purpose, purpose drives all of our behaviors, all of our actions, or the majority of our actions. Purpose is synonymous with our vision. Why do we do what we do? What is the function? What is the purpose of our existence? What's the purpose of the existence of the organization that we're part of? Those are the questions that help to give us some sort of goal or objective that we're going to be looking at. So the nature of purpose or vision influences the components of being inclusive, empowering, and ethical, because purpose is going to kind of give us the direction in which we're going to go for. So therefore, it's very important that when we become members in an organization, that the organization is led by a goal or function or purpose, and it is not driven by the person in the organization. That is one of the issues that comes up when we look at situations where we have charismatic leaders, that an organization can find itself driven by the person and not the vision of the individual. A vision will outlive an individual. Let's think about it from that perspective. The vision of, let's say, Walt Disney, for example, who had a vision of adult adult entertainment, and the vision of Fantasyland and all that type of stuff that he did in terms of entertainment and cartoon development and so on. That vision has grown into the development of Disney and all aspects of its function. If you think about any other business that existed either locally or internationally, you can always see that if a strong vision is set up, that with the passing or the departure of the first leader in that organization, let's say like what I said in terms of Walt Disney, you would see that the organization still holds to its function and is still driven by not the individual that's sitting there, but by the vision that they've created for other people who've come behind. And that requires, therefore, that we empower those people in our organizations behind us to drive the concept forward. Oftentimes, when an organization is position driven, you'd find that when a new person comes in, suddenly there's an absolute turnaround in behaviors and objectives of the organization, and that can make for a lot of waste and a lot of up and down, but no forward movement, no progress. This is something that I've seen with numerous public sector and private sector activities where there's a weak vision, and the organization is driven primarily from the person sitting in the driving seat, so to speak. And in the absence of that individual, you suddenly have a vacuum that can't be filled because there's a lack of vision. That is something I can equate with what took place in Trinidad and Tobago with the death of Dr. Eric Williams. Because the vision he had for Trinidad and Tobago wasn't well, what's the word I want to say? It wasn't something that he actively went about selling to people and selling to the nation and stuff like that. The vision that he had was kind of a personal concept that he had in place. So what we ended up suffering from during the period after his death was that we kind of floundered a bit, and whatever was going good, we left. Yes, Ryan?
Yes, sir. So along that line, would we say that that is a direct result of having, say, a personalized vision as compared to a socialized vision, that having that vacuum after after the departure of that individual?
No, I don't think so, because his vision wasn't one that was driven about his personal goals and objectives. It's just that the goals and objectives he had weren't well shared. And partly one of the reasons for that is at the time, I believe he felt that the population wasn't ready for, you see how we have things now where we have a vision and mission statement. That was a transition that took place in the latter part of the 80s. More towards the 90s, where if any of you all were part of the organizations that you are with now, you'd remember we went through a whole period where everybody was scrambling to write up vision and mission statements. I don't know if any of you all went through those exercises with your organizations. Maybe you were just joining the organization and we had that whole situation being done. I remember working in lots of business places and jobs where there was nothing like a vision and mission statement. But the concept of vision and mission statement, and more importantly, sharing that vision and mission statement with the stakeholders and the employees of the organization became something that was really critical and important. And that is what we talk about. So in the case that I'm speaking about with Trinidad, this is primarily before the whole concept of sharing your vision and that type of stuff in a very open manner was important to look at. I can't say specifically that Dr. Eric Williams' vision for Trinidad and Tobago was one that was personalized as opposed to socialized, because having read a lot of his work and read a lot of the budget speeches that he presented, he tried in each of those budget speeches to try and lay out some concept of why he was doing. That's why a budget speech is so long. Speaking of which, we have a budget speech coming up soon. You all should probably pay attention to. Well, I don't have to tell you all that. You guys are adult enough to know about the reason to pay attention to those things. But each one of those budget presentations is a small vision for the rest of the year for us. That the government has these plans, and this is where they see the year going and what they need to do. Sometimes the vision is not a nice vision because the vision is based upon current economic activities and maybe the lack of activity, or it might be driven by the optimism that we feel in terms of how the country is moving and that type of stuff. So those things are the way in which we do things now. But in the past, things weren't done from that perspective very often. It was very position driven. And that there's the danger, of course, that when a strong leader leaves an organization, or in our case here, when a strong leader dies in office, it creates pressure on keeping the momentum going because nobody else was sharing in that vision, or in some instances was aware of the vision that that person was aiming towards. So that's the drawback of that. So therefore, in order for us to do that, we would prefer that we are vision driven, not position driven. Now, the knowing, being, doing. We met this in the earlier part in chapter 1. Individuals in leadership processes need to know themselves. So obviously, this model is saying that it starts with a great deal of self-knowledge. So we need to know ourselves before we can effectively work with others to influence change and achieve common purpose. So we start with this premise again, the knowing element. To be aware of self and others, being, and to act accordingly. So that knowing, being, doing is critical to the beginning of the process of being able to generate goals and purposes for organizations. Because if you don't know yourself and you're unaware of how people look at you and that type of stuff, it's going to be difficult for you to create common goals and stuff like that. The three components are interrelated. The knowledge you possess and influence will also influence your actions. Your beliefs would influence your behaviors. And of course, for people to want to believe you, you'd have to have superior knowledge on the aspect of growth and development or the goals that you want to set up moving forward. Now, think about this. When we join organizations, we want qualified people in those positions guiding us towards or even laying out a vision that is moving us forward. We can't afford for a vision to be driven by somebody who does not have the day-to-day knowledge of how things operate. Now, that was probably one of the issues that faced Gary Griffith, that commissioner, because a lot of people felt that he did not have the institutional knowledge of the police service to be able to operate in a meaningful way, and that actually created a problem for him because it was a barrier that he had to try and overcome during his tenure as commissioner of police. And of course, he started to run awry of politicians, where he he would he would make certain statements that lay blame on them. And of course, in this environment that we're operating, that's like political suicide that you're creating there. So we have that whole situation that's facing there. But understandably, a lot of people didn't trust the vision that he was trying to put forward because they believed that he lacked a lot of the institutional information that would guide the development of something along those lines. Now, it's important that we understand that that knowledge that you have when you come into an organization is only one of the things that you're going to utilize to be able to create that groundwork from which you're going to work from. All right. The second aspect is the being part, which has to do with your belief structure, your what you consider to be your values, the value systems that govern your actions and behaviors. That is something that's also going to have to go with your knowledge. So yes, you could be quite qualified, but if you are you come into the work environment and your belief structure is one that is counterproductive to the belief structure of generally the people who work in the organization, then you're going to find problems. So if you have negative values, then that's going to be, you're willing to take bribes and you're willing to do these kind of things. Those kind of belief structures, or you're kind of what we call morally flexible, or as some people would say, the service has a morality of its own. Those kind of statements kind of speak to behaviors that are less than acceptable to the wider society, and therefore we look upon somebody like that as not necessary, despite the knowledge they may have, may not be somebody that we'll want in a position of it. So again, it's one influencing the other and influencing the rest. So it's as they talk about here, it's a kind of circular belief or circular influential thing. So I don't like the word circular. I think of it more of a spiral, because if it works the correct way, then your knowledge will drive a more educated belief structure that you have. That positive belief structure will widen your behavior and move in a outward spirals, because every time you go through things, you're going to, increase your knowledge, firm up your belief structures, probably even open them up a little more. That is going to be something that's important. All right, so Palmer uses the phrase head, heart, and practice to describe the paradox in teaching. So the nature of what they're using here is to align or create a metaphor here now between the knowing, being, doing with head, heart, and practice. Now, all of us may have had at some experience good teachers and bad teachers. So I like that Palmer is using teaching as the basis for this particular metaphor that they're utilizing. So obviously, teachers need to be qualified, so they need to know their business, but they also need to have the heart to want to do it, and it must show in their practice. And that practice should reinforce what's happening in the head and the heart, because I am particularly so sure, we've come across many circumstances, probably not ourselves, but hopefully, maybe you've seen it in your children and that type of stuff, where somebody is quite educated, but they're not passionate about teaching, and therefore their practice suffers because they really don't want to teach. And this is something that occurred when there was a big increase in the salaries of teaching service. And now all of a sudden we had a lot of people applying to teach, but they were applying to it because their motivation was really earning more, earning a fairly large salary, and looking at the time off you get for vacation as an additional part of your earnings, which is true, because I mean, the amount of vacation you get is part of the compensation package that you receive. So have any of you all ever experienced really bad teachers and whose heart and head are not in line with each other, and therefore their practice is one that is less than what you would like it to be?
Oh,
No?
yes, absolutely,
Yes, sir.
absolutely.
My question is a little more pointed. Have you met that circumstance here in Costa?
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, good. All right, that's good. At least that means we're going all right. But it can happen. I'm not saying it's just an isolated incident. But what you do have sometimes is head and heart colliding and practice reflecting that. All right, so that's really something that we want to look at across the board. But hopefully you during your lifespan, you might have met people like this who have the knowledge but lack the will, and they really don't want to be doing what they're doing, kind of situation. Hopefully you've never found yourself in a situation like that. I have been fortunate that when I started to work, I've always worked in jobs that I enjoyed working in, and I loved working in. And so when I found teaching, or when I started teaching, I found that was probably one of the most satisfying things I ever got involved with. Even better than working in businesses and stuff like that. All right. All right. So, so the synthesis of these three components is critical in terms of applying the thing. So, people will collaborate with those who are credible and those who are knowing. So that makes sense. We like to work with people who know what they're doing, and therefore leaders need to demonstrate competency and maintain a certain amount of what I refer to as responsible knowledge. You must know more than everybody else, but obviously you can't know everything. So you're also going to have to be able to open yourself up to learning more as we move forward. So there are 4 levels of skills essential to leaders in achieving this particular type of thing. Interpersonal skills, which is communication skills. Conceptualization skills, which is the ability for you to conceptualize very abstract ideas and think about them in a creative manner. Technical skills, those are the technical skills that are the expertise that are required for your job specification or your discipline or the field that you're operating in. So for example, in your area of national security, there are lots of technical skills that you all would have to acquire and become really good with, in terms of becoming an expert in the field. And of course, there are places for you to go and study and organize those things. And then tactical skills, which is the ability now to work with other people to achieve the objectives that you're looking for. Now, conceptualization and technical skills are relatively easier. They're much easier to develop than the interpersonal and tactical skills. In fact, especially in fields where the field is very surge here. Hold on. You guys hearing me still?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
Yes, sir.
We just had a surge here now. I might end up losing my internet connectivity with you all in a bit. All right. So the tactical and interpersonal skills would be the ones in which the challenges tend to sit with, because you're dealing with human behavior, as we talked about before. So the technical and conceptualization skills are quite easily, relatively, I can't say quite easily, but they're more easily acquired because they are more dependent on the individual themselves. But interpersonal and tactical skills is more sits upon the ability of individuals to develop good relationships with other people and vice versa. That is the critical element. In fact, I remember listening to a speech from what was his name? Professor Gord, not Gord. He was really important with the setting up of UTT. Anyway, this very he comes from the oil and gas sector. Ken Gordon, I think that was his name, Professor Ken Gordon. Doubt that, but he was very pivotal in the creation of the science departments and the mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, petrochemical engineering sectors of the UTT campus. And they, of course, all came out of the UWI experience as well. And one of the things that he talked about in a graduation ceremony was that the technical skills are not the problem, but the people skills or the soft skills of communicating with people, of dealing with human relations, were the skills that most engineers and technicians tend to have the most amount of difficulties and problems. We said the theory and the practice of the engineering was the easy part, but the human skills were the ones in which there were lots of problems. And therefore, I don't know, many of you all might have done leadership training and communication training in the context of an additional piece of training alongside your technical training in your service. Maybe, I don't know, but I know for a lot of the programs, especially in national security, there was a lot of additional training that went on with interpersonal skills, negotiation skills, mediation, conflict resolution, those types of things. Any of you all went through those or went to those types of training along the way?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Which one did you do? Which one did you get involved with?
Mediation, conflict resolution, that kind of thing.
Right. And this was setting you up for a position in management, not so?
It was at the just at the beginning of that era. That's right.
Yeah. That's why you would have done it, because generally what they tend to find is that, and what service are you with?
TTPS.
Right. So generally your focus of training is really on detection and that type of stuff, not so? Firearms and all those types of things, and administration of that type of stuff. But the interpersonal skills, technical skills, those were the ones that were probably lacking, and therefore they would have tried to make sure that that type of training became available to broaden the capacity, especially of people taking up supervisory positions, because in your supervisory position, that's what you're dealing with. You're not really dealing with the day-to-day crime fighting activities, but you're dealing with working with other people and getting things out of them. Yes?
Yeah, yes, sir. Well, that from the reading and from experience, I think interpersonal skills is well lacking across the board. It has been an issue for some time now. There are only few people who tend to exhibit some sort of interpersonal skills that is progressive.
Well, let's put it this way. Your turn is coming, and therefore you the catalyst. This should be the catalyst for you to make the improvements that you hope to find in other people. Because again, and therefore you would leave that legacy for people coming behind you to want to aspire towards that behavior. Make sense? It's sort of like the challenge that this program is trying to get you to accept, that you are part of the change process that organizations such as the TTPS and the fire services and whichever service you're working in, but generally it's in the public sector, it requires an internal metamorphosis to take place to be able to move us out of the morass of the colonial-based system that we've inherited and move us into a more modern approach to things, this being one of the opportunities that you face. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to change everything and everybody around you, but the small little bit that you are capable of doing is going to add value. I mean, like as my friend used to always say, there's one more drop in the bucket, and that will eventually fill the bucket and it will run over. So that's something that that you want to be part of the process of the change that ought to be taking place. All right. And that's one of the frustrations you're going to face when you go back out to work. And a lot of the stuff that you've been meeting in these classes is really designed for the ideal circumstances. But when you go back out to the working environment, you're going to find that the same status quo is going to be sitting there. And what do? You either make the small changes that you can and make those changes kind of stick a little bit, or you give in and let the bureaucracy of the organization just rule right over you. And that's the danger here. The danger is that a lot of you all will come out of these various training programs with all these great ideas, but the bureaucracy is going to just rule right over you and flatten you back out the way they want you to be. And that's the challenge that you're all going to face when you get back outside there. It's important. I remember one group that we did some training with before realized that one of the weaknesses of the national security was a lack of coordination between all the branches of the services, and he believed that and he became a senior man in the organization after he left the training. But because he was so near the end of his run, basically he was coming up to retirement, he wasn't able to get the kind of things done. But more importantly, when he tried to do that sort of coordination between the various, let's say you're doing a raid somewhere, or you're doing something, you get the Coast Guard involved and you get this one involved and you have a coordinating arm. He got a lot of blowback from the superiors that he met, because they didn't trust the other organizations, didn't have the network set up so that they can have that kind of interdepartmental cooperation and coordination. And it was a real frustrating thing that he went against. I remember he used to come back to school and get advice from us to try, and he wanted these short courses done to help train other people, to help other people to get that. It was really something else. It was a real uphill battle for him. I know he was not satisfied when he retired from the service, and that's something that has to change. All right. So the doing of knowing and being means.
So if you don't mind,
go ahead.
Raise my hand because of the thunder and the lightning and the heavy rain that we're experiencing presently, I am not hearing everything, and my volume is up to all.
Okay,
right?
Let me see if I can help you.
I'm not hearing anything at all.
Hold on. All right, take my volume down, send my mic volume up. All right, is that a little better?
So I will just be on. I may probably have to listen to the recording after, because I'm really not hearing anything at all.
Are you listening with a headset or are you listening on speakers? Rooney?
Sir?
Are you listening with a headset or are you listening with speakers?
I'm listening on the volume on my laptop.
Oh, that's probably why the speakers on the laptop. Do you have a headset that you could use instead to listen? That might be able to cut out the external sound that you're having trouble with.
Oh, okay. I do have a headset. I'll just excuse me. I'll just get it, please. Thank you.
All right, cool. Try that and see. All right, so the doing, knowing, being, acting, that type of stuff, the character and knowledge is not enough to facilitate that change process, but the doing part of it is going to add to that. So doing attempts to produce results, accomplishes the vision, creates change, and influences others to act. That's the doing element that we know from that three-part model. So when you come across a leader who does not like to do things, it creates problems in an organization. Organizations grind to a halt when you have somebody who's sitting in a position of decision making, but is fixated upon perfection and will not act unless every aspect that they want in place to be there. That's because people who are looking for perfection means that they don't want failure. And the problem with that is that if you do nothing, you don't fail. So maybe if you fail to act, you also fail. And that is something that I have actually worked with leaders in the past who were like this. They wouldn't do anything unless they thought everything they needed was in place, and that was a really frustrating situation to be working in. It meant that there was little or no willingness to accept any type of errors, any sort of mistake making. So you had leaders who set a zero defect or no mistakes, is also saying don't take chances. And the only time we could actually learn something sometimes is really when we take chances. So that 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 part of the process is also an important element. Learning is also an outcome that we need to be accepting. Even though we fail or it doesn't work, we still learn something from the exercise. One of the reasons why, um, even though you may not succeed at doing something, it doesn't mean you haven't learned something from the behavior or from the attempt. So that is part and parcel of how we learn. We don't learn things and get it right the first time. We make mistakes, and hopefully whatever we're doing is not the end of the world, but we're able to, you know, realize that there are errors, there are things that went wrong, and therefore we could recoup from that and learn from our errors. Now, the problem with that is, especially in the field that you guys are operating in, mistakes can be extremely dangerous, especially if it means the loss of life of somebody in your organization, either your partner or other people who you're on an exercise with. And that is where the problems come about. But you can't not do anything, or else, nothing will get done. I don't know if you all have that idea of how things operate like that. Lyndon, see your microphone open. Oh, close it off now. All right. Anybody else? Anybody had that kind of experience of working with people who just didn't want to move forward, and this everything kind of worked from that? All right. So leaders can promote learning in three ways. One, through your own exercise, your own learning. And therefore that means through your own example, by helping others to learn, which means whatever you are skilled in, you can teach to other people and empower them, and by shaping and contributing to the culture of the organization that promotes learning. And that's something, wow, we start to get some thunder here too. That is something that helps to make the environment much more learner friendly. It means that we are likely to have a greater amount of contributions being made in the organization when people feel safe in that environment that we could learn things together. All right. Now, being purposeful means having a commitment to a goal or activity, the ability to collaborate and find common ground with others to facilitate positive change. So we're back on, we're out of the knowing being recap that we did there to the relational leadership is purposeful. So that the purpose that we want to speak to here is a purpose that is, the word I want to use is positive in nature. And that positivity helps us to develop collaborative approaches with other people because we are quickly able to find common ground with others around us to be able to move towards getting that. Now, positive change means working hard towards resolving differences among people that you're working with, finding that common direction and building a shared vision to improve the organization. Now, it's important for us to remember that the purpose of the organization is the driving force of the organization. it's the most essential element in relational leadership. The the conventional paradigm often asserts that the positional leader must have a clear vision, but research has shown that there are two types of vision activities: the personalized vision and the socialized vision. So this is the two types of vision that can't remember who was talking about it before, but they obviously went through this thing before. So the personalized vision and the socialized vision. The personalized vision refers to a person, usually a person with the, let's say the CEO, announcing their particular dreams and plans and then imposing it on other people. Yes, he's right then. Then if that's the case of what personalized vision was, then yes, this was the vision that Dr. Eric Williams had for Trinidad and Tobago, but he was imposing it on people almost as if, well, I mean, I think truly he felt that the vast majority of people were not educated enough to understand his vision. And therefore, we had to lead them like children. So they used a more what's the term? There was a term that was used for the more I don't want to say patronizing, but it was a more of a fatherly approach to things, or parental approach to getting things done. We know what's best for you, so just shut up and listen and do what we say, type of behavior. Participants, therefore, yes, Ryan, was it you that had brought this up?
Yeah, yes, it was me. So that
So yes, you were right.
that's why I made the point, because with his departure, his absence, and not just his case, I mean in general cases, persons who may not agree or may not understand the vision, I think is where the problem lies, after the fact that there may not be a smooth transition into following up with it.
That's true. But one of the things that I know Dr. Eric Williams had spoken about was the level of literacy in the country was questionable. And he felt that sometimes the relative technical nature of, you see, he came from a school of thought that indicated that the student had to rise to the level of the teacher. And today we have more of the teacher bringing themselves down to the level of the student to bring them upwards. So it's a different technique. So the one is the older system of teaching, the sage on the stage. I don't know if you all ever heard about this before. And the other is a what we call learner-centered teaching, where the teacher is the guide on the side. So the concept of the guide on the side is to come down to the level of the student and help them to realize their own potential by encouraging and providing the skills and the support they need to become, the qualified individual that they want to do. So much so that if you ever read some of the older speeches that were given from the budget speeches and stuff like that, or the speeches in Parliament, you'd realize that the language that they were utilizing was also very isolating, in the sense that if you didn't understand what they were talking about, then it'll just pass whoosh over your head kind of thing all the time, because it meant that they were speaking in a language that was beyond the capacity of everyday people. And that's the nature of a personalized vision. It is the vision of the individual, and he's imposing that vision on other people. And the people in society have very little choice but to adopt this, because they have no power in the circumstances, as opposed to a socialized vision, which is building a vision from among the group members, recognizing that people support what they create. And this is where sharing vision and creating socialized vision is important. Now, I remember with the creation of COSTAT, for example, we started back in 1996, 97, around there, so where we started to work in the development of that. And very early in that process, we were able to, we went through different exercises to get people's point of views from all aspects of the organization. Now, at that time, I worked at the John Donaldson Technical Institute, and I remember having to bring together the vision statements and mission statements developed from faculty, from support staff, from administrative staff, from janitorial staff. Everybody at all levels of the organization was asked where do they see themselves and what do they see themselves in the College of Science Technology within COSTAT. But back then we didn't call it COSTAT, we just called it the National Community College. And that vision and mission statement was developed over, I think we took almost 2 years to develop that vision and mission statement that we have that existed here. And that vision statement was one that everybody who got involved with it had some level of contribution. And that level of contribution helped to move people forward in, moving with the organization, moving in that direction. Sharing that vision didn't mean that everybody had to do everything towards it, but everybody feels involved in the process. And when you feel involved in the process, there's a greater likelihood that you will support the activities that go on. All right. So effective leaders don't just impose their vision on others, but recruit others to a shared vision. And that shared vision is a difficult process. And that was part of the reason why it was so problematic, especially this was prior to the proliferation of internet and internet activities, talking about the early part of the middle of the 90s, 95, 96. So email was now picking up, online internet searches, those kind of things. Wi-Fi connectivity was not, you had to have wired connectivity all the time. It was, back then it was difficult, but now it's much easier in the process. Yes, Duncan, see your hand up.
I was sorry, so I know reading this effectively that was just impose your vision again, right?
Just a bit, yeah.
Yeah, well, the rain falling
Heavy.
I would try, right? Personalized vision. Is that a vision that is imposed or impressed, whichever word you choose to use, upon others? Personalized vision.
Yeah, it's one that is put on other people.
All right, okay. And Eric Williams had a personalized vision.
I think so. Yeah, from looking at the definition, it really speaks to him because he was unable to articulate one that at least from what I remember from reading his material,
Yeah,
it was
that's
one he had for the college for the Trinidad
yeah.
and Tobago, but it wasn't one that was well shared and didn't have the process of people buying into it and people helping develop where we were going. And I think back at that time frame to the whole issue of the general population having a very low level of literacy was also a bit of an issue as well. And that is true, because at that time that was one of the objectives. That's why he did universal.
Yeah, Columbus to Castro. I think that was the book.
Yeah, well, that's one of them. You also had
one of them.
yeah. But what I spent a lot of time reading was his budget contributions in Parliament as from the 60s moving forward. And I was able to get a fair amount of the ideas, because each budget statement that he gave laid out plans and objectives for the organization, for the country, in terms of how they would spend money to do this, to do that, and to do the next. But the general population did not understand a lot of what he had to say because of the way in which he presented the information and the language that he utilized. It was well above them. Yes?
Yeah, the language in which he spoke. Alessandra?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right, thanks. Okay.
All right. So in terms of developing the vision, therefore, the effective leader just is not supposed to impose their vision on other people. Doesn't mean that the vision was a bad vision for Trinidad and Tobago. It's just that at the time, it was probably the only way he saw or understood how vision was done. Because the kind of thinking we do now is absolutely different. So in today's environment, it becomes much more difficult for a leader to come forward and start to talk about a vision without getting some sort of buy-in from other folks. And that's important, especially now in our digital age, where it's so much easier for us to communicate with people, and our level of literacy and access to information is so much so much easier than it was in the past. So that's something that that purpose is going to be important with, because and if you think about it, if you are part of the process of developing the goals and objectives of the organization, then you are going to feel a level of commitment to the organization to achieving that. And it's one of the things, one of the reasons why when I moved from Ministry of Education into the ministry, into COSTAT, after its creation in 2000, I had no problems giving up. Like, for instance, when I left Ministry of Education, I took a pay cut to come across to COSTAT. I also lost my tenure with Ministry of Education as well. I had to give up all those things and I willingly gave up those things because I looked at the vision of the college, and I felt as if, I can do a lot more here than I could do in the Ministry of Education because of the degree of bureaucracy that was involved in the way it was developed and the way it was running. Because up to this day, there are things in the Ministry of Education that have not changed since I was back there. I mean, it's ridiculous in terms of how stagnant the ministry runs things, as opposed to the actual thing of education. Education has moved miles beyond where the ability of the ministry to manage what is going on there. So and that last statement there, vision animates, inspires, and transform purpose into action. And that was one thing. And I wrote so much course outlines, it wasn't funny. As part of the process of creating the learning environments, creating the courses, and those types of things, because and helped train people, went into advisement, and all the actual activities that involved being part of the faculty of the college was something that I got, really involved with, heavily involved with. Hold a second there, guys. I need to. Right, sorry about that. My alarm just went off. Don't know why I have that alarm on. All right, so lots of purposeness coming from being involved in the process. So, and that functionality of purpose is one that helps to drive people in organizations. As people get more involved and they become committed, you can feel that sense of things. Now, you have to be careful with this too, because if you, as a leader, you begin to go back on division and you start to cut corners, and you start to, make changes to the vision and mission statements, and you can negatively impact the people because you can frustrate them. All right. So that's one of the things that you have to pay attention to. All right. So generally, when we talk about vision and mission, and because there's a group that's going to be dealing with vision and strategic direction, and you'll be doing a big presentation in this area. And look at what the function of vision and mission is all about. It's going to show you that having shared vision and shared mission statements is something that helps organizations move forward in a more meaningful manner and with a greater level of commitment from everybody in the organization. But it means that everybody is committed. So and one of the problems that you face is that as an organization begins to get older, the mission and vision statements will stay relatively constant, because remember, vision is something that we aspire towards in the future. The mission is how you're going to get there. What are we doing on an everyday basis to be able to get there? And then, of course, we have the other things that support that, concepts that support that, which is like your core strengths and that kind of stuff. But the whole concept is that when people come into the organization, like in COSTAT now, they are not going to be part of the creation of that vision and mission statement. So it is incumbent upon those of us who are in the organization now, who were part of the process, to share that creation, that creativity with the organization, with the new people coming in. But it requires that the individuals concerned remain at a high level of commitment to the vision. All right. and that they don't feel cheated, soured, or misdirected along the way. So that's something that is important for ever so often to reconnecting the people in the organization to the vision and mission statement of the college and keeping it kind of fresh. All right, that kind of stuff that moves on, especially as you have more people coming into the organization. So whenever we are looking at making positive change in the organization or in your grouping, then it's important that you make sure that what you're doing is also going to be justifying the ends that you're going to do. So the means justifies the end. So you have to have coordination between what you do and how you're going to get it done, so that you don't you're not hypocritical in your approach to achieving this positive change that you want by doing negative things to get there. So there must be a coordination between what you do and how you do it. All right. Leadership happens when groups intend to accomplish change, not just when they do accomplish change. So we have to know that along the way, we have to know we're working towards this change, which is one of the problems that we face when we have new people coming in. A lot of them are coming in not with that level of commitment, but with the idea that this is a job, I'm coming to work here and I'm going to earn my income and I'm going to achieve my own personal goals and dreams. But you're becoming part of a team is a broader activity in order to bring you into the fold and understand what your role is and function is going to be in achieving these goals. It's a much more challenging position for a leader in the organization. And that is primarily one of the things that new leaders in the organization have to deal with when they bring in new staff. So that's something that has to be dealt with on a regular basis, because the grouping is going to change over time, and therefore you're gonna, because people will fall by the wayside, other people will leave the organization, but everybody has to still maintain that view, that vision of what's going to be coming in the future. All right, having the intention of improving a situation, accomplishing a task, or implementing a common purpose is part of a change process. So change is going to be the only positive, not the only positive, but the only constant in the organization. So that when you get accustomed to doing things one way, and this is something that annoys a lot of people. Why does it annoy people? Because we don't like change. Change takes us out of our comfort activities, and therefore whenever change is going to be made, we tend to get annoyed, frustrated, and the first thing we say, no, we're not doing that. But change is inevitable. You have to change in order to maintain your your vitality and your relevance in the world around you. If you don't change, you become irrelevant and you get left behind. Consider, for example, the number of institutions that lost their ability to hold on to their student body because of their inability to adapt to the online environment during the pandemic situations. Lots of schools suffered from that, especially the secondary schools and primary schools. They had so much opposition from the teachers themselves that the student body suffered during that period, and therefore, as a result of that, they had ended up having to, take students back and kind of slow them down and go back over things. And it was an absolute mess because people weren't willing to adapt to the change. The college, on the other hand, within the space of a couple of months, was able to move on to, the vast majority of us were able to move on to the online platform and start presenting and start doing work with our classes, and doing so in a successful manner as well, getting that e-class environment up and running very quickly. How many of you all struggled with that transition, or did you all come in when we had already? Yeah, you're already in here when you all came in when we did the transition already, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but most of you all probably had your own children. If for those of you who have children, having to make that transition.
Yes, sir. And they grasped very well, and they was the one who was able to teach us, the different
Correct.
platforms buttons, you know, and how to get in and to change this and to change, you know.
Right. But how did they feel about the classes they were attending? Because a lot of the teachers who were doing the online environment didn't like it. Maybe, hopefully, you've had good experiences. Your children have had good experiences. But I know there was a lot of I wouldn't say hesitation, but there was a lot of backlash from teachers.
So I think it was the problem was they had to put in more work, but if they had put it in initially, it would have carried forward to this day.
It would, yes. The foundation, you see, the major set of work was in the initial transition, and then afterwards it was a matter of just maintaining and moving forward and adding more kind of thing along the way. But a lot of people didn't like it. They just adamantly said, no, we're not doing this. And those that said that had to do what? We had some faculty that did that here. They said, nah, we can't go online, face-to-face classes only, and yada, yada, yada. And eventually a lot of them had to end up leaving because other people were able to show them, listen, you can bring this online by doing X, Y, Z. Yes, you might need to have some face-to-face sessions, but we could minimize the amount of face-to-face sessions by doing X, Y, and Z. And that hesitance, reluctance, or whatever it was that was holding them back eventually led to them having to leave the organization because they weren't they weren't able to do it. So there is a group, the last group that's presenting, that's going to look at change theory, and they're going to see some of these things here that I'm talking about. So change theory, whenever we're trying to make change and change for the good, requires a process of unfreezing a situation, making the change, and then refreezing. Now the unfreezing is triggered by some sort of event. Like, so in the case that we were talking about here, we're talking about the pandemic, and the pandemic was a trigger event. It created the situation where we had to make change or we would die. Literally, the organization would die. But current theory is telling us rather than freezing back after you've made the change, instead of doing that, try and leave the organization in a sort of slushy environment so that it becomes a little better suited for making consistent changes over time. And that's something that has to happen. All right. So even after changes in plan, it would be an error in these times to even consider an issue of being refrozen. It's best instead to consider the outcome as to be slushy, which is more permeable and open to being able to make adjustments across the board. Yes, Ryan.
Yes, sir. So what are we saying that this well, slush period for as they outlined it here, what is that, like
that's
temporary
forever
period, a temporary period, or would that
nope.
be the status of
forever.
the organization moving forward?
Yes, it'll have to be the status of the organization to be in a slushy environment because there is constant change that's pressing on us. So it means that we're leaving the organization in a setup where it is able to make adjustments as required by the environments that we find ourselves operating in.
But would by if it stays within a okay, so say we don't refreeze, we leave it in a slushy state. However, if over a vast period of time, wouldn't that become inculcated? Okay, this is the set way. So in essence, it have a kind of cultural freezing of it.
You see, that's the problem, because you're thinking about, okay, next 5 years we'll be doing the same thing, but that's not the case, because within the very limited time frame that you're looking at, you find that change is going to happen again. So, all right, so we talked about the change at the end of 2019 to 2020, when we went on the online environment. In that movement from then to now, we have changed platforms, we've changed methodologies, we've changed the course outlines, we've rewritten all the course outlines. We've done a lot of change, but every time you feel as if you're finished changing. No, there's more change coming. And that's the situation that's life, isn't it? If you think about it, we like consistency in life. So Ryan, you're speaking to something there that is human in nature, because human beings live on routine. And when our routines get messed up, then that is we start to have problems. But if instead of letting the routine be one of of consistent sameness, but one of consistent evolution, there's a difference. That's the objective of trying to set up an organ. I'm not going to say this is not an easy thing, because when we get accustomed to doing things in a particular way, and then we get told, all right, we need to make another adjustment, we need to make another change, it will be difficult, but it shouldn't be as difficult as before, because you've gone through that slushy period, and you've gone through that change of unfreezing, but you're going to be making further changes along the way. So you remain in a flexible environment. That's what they're talking about. But yes, you can find yourself getting stuck again, which is something that has happened. People who have gone through situations and done significant changes in their organization find that after a while they get refrozen. And that's dangerous, because when the next trigger event comes around that calls upon another set of changes, it's going to be even harder to make those that are changing again. So that's the thing. So the classic model describing the change process is moving from the present state through a transitionary state to a desired state still works, but we encourage a caution that the desired state should be viewed with less rigidity. And that's what we're talking about, that the place that we end up should be a place where we're not locked in, but we have room for adjustment. And that is important in terms of setting up the future for us. All right. The biggest issue with or problem with change is the fact that it is very time consuming, especially when you're trying to build it from a socialized environment. So again, we're talking about socialized goals. So the change that you're trying to make requires the input from everybody, and it's extremely time consuming. I think I mentioned to you all before, in terms of the development of the vision and mission statements for Costa, it took about a year more to get it done, to come to some sort of finalized statement that we were able to deal with. But can an organization really sacrifice that amount of time to make a change? No, because the survival of the organization would be at risk. So it means that we have to make the change while buying people in. So we had to do two things all at the same time, and that is where it can be problematic. And it becomes difficult to really do that. And this is where, when new people join, they have to be brought into this change environment all the time, and they have to connect with that vision quickly. So you have to do sort of like indoctrination work with them. So those are the kind of things that we have to spend a lot of time doing induction timeframes with them, and then do mentoring alongside other lecturers, because you can't just leave them on their own to go their own way. You have to kind of help develop the concept and that kind of stuff. And that then leads us to, in order to do those kind of things, we have to be inclusive. And that's where the relational leadership model moves to. Inclusiveness means that we have to be understanding, valuing, and actively engaging diversity in views, approaches, styles, aspects of individuality, such as gender and sexual orientation or culture, that add multiple perspectives to a group's activity. So this is what, in essence, inclusivity is all about. And this is a challenge that some people have more success with, and other people have less success with, especially if they find themselves holding on valuing what some people might see as obsolete values, or values that are highly conflicting in nature, or they are unwilling to understand other people's points of views and just be closed off to anybody else's frame of reference and thinking. So concepts such as gender and sexual orientation are probably one of the most spoken about at this point in time. But there are subtle differences between differences between individuals that create just as much issues and problems. For example, how many of you all here consider yourself to be OCD? Anybody?
Slightly so.
Ms.
So I
Carter?
believe that, sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry, Bruni, go ahead. Annie, go ahead then, Ms. Waldron.
So I believe everybody have a form of OCD.
Right, but those who are really bad. I want somebody who views themselves as being extremely badly OCD. Yeah, maybe not here, but if you ever come across somebody who's seriously OCD, so Ryan's hand come up, but now you may not be OCD in all environments, but you might be OCD in particular places, like in your car, in your home, that kind of stuff. You like things done a particular way. That's a diversity issue that you're going to face a problem with, because especially when you start to include other people into your life, your children and your spouse and that type of stuff, they're going to approach the things that you do in your household differently, or the things that they do in their jobs differently, and they're going to value things differently. And that difference is going to create a barrier between the two of you, because you can't understand why they can't put the damn thing in the sink when they finish using it. Right? Or why they don't, why when they're doing this, they keep on making a mess by throwing things all over the place. That is things that they're not as big as gender and sexual orientation or cultural differences, but they are small things in terms of how we do things as individuals that have us in conflict with other people. And we don't value that particular perspective or behavior because we can't see the sense in it. But understand this. For somebody who is more messy in their approach or freewheeling in their approach to doing things, you might find that they be more creative, that they are able to view things from angles or perspectives that we can't see because we're always looking at things in a very structured manner. And that unstructured look or that unstructured vision of perception that another person is looking at something with can and is a valuable perspective to have in an organization. I think I saw somebody's hand go up. Who was that?
So I think there's a problem I have.
Why, Bruno?
I don't know if to call it OCD, but I believe in structure. And
But
I have I don't know, I feel it's how I was brought up
yeah,
in a
well,
strict Christian household.
yeah,
And
environment has a lot to do with
yes, that
yeah.
environment. And I believe that I just believe in things that should be done
You
a
have
particular
children,
way and structured. My children are structured, you
right? So
know?
you have children,
Yeah.
right? And
So
that means that if any of them had any differences in approaches, you did what with them?
but it's not that I did anything. If they had difference in approaches, and then
Be
again, I don't
honest
even
with
know if they had
yourself. Huh?
different in approaches because they
Did
know
you
in issues they come to me. I don't know. It's just ridiculous. It's just terrible. I can't explain it, but
and how do your spouse fits into this?
I have a spouse that don't work in this country.
Right.
So he don't really be around as much. When he's here, he's here. When he's not, he's not. So it's like
that lends itself to
during the COVID time, it was the worst because having him during that time for a length of time around me for a plenty period of time was had some adjusting, you know. But yeah, it's like that.
I hear you, but I understand because you have grown accustomed and you've trained your children to do things the way you do it. Now, remember that this is something that they're going to carry forward in their life as well. What the one thing you want to do is, regardless of the fact that you like things done in a particular manner, understand, try to develop the the skill of understanding why other people might try to do something differently and how that difference might be rewarding in nature. Um, so it is really difficult though when it's something like, you know, doing things in a particular manner that gives you a sense of satisfaction and completeness, and then somebody's doing it in another way. They get a sense of accomplishment out of it, but you're seeing all you're seeing is the error and the mess. That's all you're seeing because that's what you're focused on. But you're not seeing the outcome at the end of the day, what it comes up, and that is a matter of becoming comfortable and understanding that not everybody does things the way you do it, and appreciating their approach to doing things, because that approach is an approach that might help us to develop a deeper understanding from a different perspective. And that is really the main thing. Now, I'm not telling you you have to agree with what they do, but you have to understand, because you have to include those people in your general activities and your general life. It's sort of like your husband. I mean, he's good when he's out of the house, but when he's home, he's trouble. And that could speak to, like, even when he retires and he comes back home, that could speak to some serious trouble. Yes, Ryan.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to weigh in on that same conversation. Now, I know a lot of the general population we tend to misnomer what actually OCD really truly is. I know it spans
It's a spectrum. Yes.
exactly, it spans a bigger spectrum, up to the point where people have no choice. They're unable to resist and unable to let go
Yep.
of that control. And obviously, when I reach that high, obviously, there's a lot more work to be done to
There's
try and
actually
come out.
medication for it now too.
Exactly, yeah. I believe I am somewhere along
The
that
spectrum.
spectrum.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm high enough that I am unable to let go of control. There are times when it's harder than others. But yes, I have seen it cause some problems relationship wise as well as work wise as well, especially being in a management position and you have to manage people under you. And I think that is an issue for a lot of managers too, especially if they have this level of control and this way of doing things. And as we see somewhere along, I think it was this same chapter, I think, where we say that we can stifle creativity by allowing that. I know it's not as black and white as being organized and messy.
Yes.
It comes down to this is the way this should be done, or this is the way that we should approach this task. And anything
Right.
outside of that it tends to create some cause of conflict or some cause of confusion. So I know it's a broader spectrum, and especially as we are on a leadership topic here and a management level, I know it can cause some problems and may need some work in getting
Well,
over.
it's something that we have to adjust to, because I have brought it down to the point of view of how people like to arrange their life around them. But if you really think about it, it's really about how we go about thinking, and the way in which we think and perceive the world around us is different and may not be the same as everybody else, and how other people perceive these things is really where we are going to run into the most amount of problems, because somebody looks at their culture. So you meet somebody from a different culture, and they are treating with things they think about things in a different way than you would, because of the culture and the cultural values that you hold. And their culture says something totally different. So this is especially important when you come across people. All right, so we've had a lot of culture shock, with the number of Venezuelans that have arrived in our environment. So it's actually created for them more than us, because they are confronted by more of our culture hitting them, and we really haven't taken the opportunity or time to to collectively start to observe what their cultural thought is. Though we have some connectivity with them, lots of people here have family originating out of Venezuela, but the reality is that their lives have developed along a particular way, whereas the lives here in Trinidad have developed along a different avenue. And when we bring those two frames of reference together, they create problems. So now that we have current Venezuelans living alongside current Trinidadians, even though we may have shared backgrounds and shared ethnic origins, we have absolutely different methodologies of thinking about things. So that the physical stuff is the easier ones to overcome. The mental barriers that we put up are the ones that creates the bigger problems, and it is the ones that this program tries to get us to approach, because it's really about our value structures sitting inside of us. Why do we find it? Why do men in particular feel threatened by another man who's gay? Why is the reaction so visceral for some people, and for other people they could really care less? You know, you're gay or you're not gay. It doesn't matter to them. More importantly, why is it okay for you to see two women kissing but not two men? And those kind of things are the ways in which we have to kind of look at why we're thinking the way we're thinking, and why we're doing the way we're doing things that really just try to keep people apart from us. So the concept about relational leadership is that we have to pay attention to the way in which we react and the way in which we think about people who are different to us. Understanding that we need to understand why they're different, understand why they think differently or behave differently, but recognizing that there's still value to be gained from having somebody with those differences in your organization and moving beyond your old framework to working with those individuals. And that's the challenge of leadership. Challenge of leadership is to go beyond your own frame of reference, your own hang-ups, your own issues, and work with other people, regardless of the differences that we see. And work not just, because you have to do it, but you're willing to work with those individuals across the board. And that is really going to be the problem, because if we don't, then eventually we're going to find ourselves in an organization with only same thinking people. And that sameness of thinking and sameness of valuing creates a blinder on the organization, because we can no longer look at the environment, but in the way we see things or the way we collectively see things, because we're also very similar. That is how you get hate groups starting up, because hate groups start up because they believe that their method of thinking or their thought process is superior to everybody else, and everybody else has to pander to what you do. And that organization is then governed by, we only want things this way and we don't want it with those other things, and therefore we start creating this animosity between people, which can eventually lead into violence, and violence then breeds more issues moving down the road. So those are the kind of thinking we have to be wary of when we think from a leadership perspective and we're thinking about inclusivity. Now, as I said about this, the fact of having different types of individuals and organizations from a wide spectrum of behaviors and thinking and ideas is that they bring things to the organization that you cannot even perceive of having there, because there is we just simply can't look at it, we can't see it, and therefore they bring those things to us regardless. And they would only be able to bring it if we were inclusive enough to embrace them and put them in the organization. Now, we talked about this before, listening with empathy and communicating with civility are communication skills that facilitate inclusion. So empathy and civility, those are the things that we have to, that's how we have to behave in an empathic manner and a civil manner. Inclusiveness breeds new leadership and creates a positive cycle. So if you as the leader behave in this empathic and civil nature, then you're likely to encourage that behavior in the other people around you, so that when you eventually leave the office, it will create that potential for the person coming behind you to want to emulate that behavior moving forward. So this is what we were talking about earlier. We were saying that that empathic kind of open inclusive behavior is not something that we see a lot of in the public sector. You guys are moving into those areas, so you need to exhibit that inclusive, caring, empathic type of listening structure and behaviors, and inspire those below you to want to aspire towards these particular types of behaviors. If you want, share the textbook with them. Let them, you're gonna have this in your files and stuff. Then you share the textbooks with them. Let them look at the textbooks, read them, and kind of grab from them what they can about this relational leadership model. Because if you're able to engender better relationships with the people with whom you work, and the organization moves forward over time with it, then encourage others to want to aspire to those things as well. All right, so the whole concept of inclusivity is important, and therefore it cannot be understated in terms of how we move forward in the organization, because we also have to encourage, and that's going to come up in a little bit in terms of other people taking over the rules. So if you have to start to prepare other people to take up leadership positions, you're going to have to be inclusive of everybody around you and different cultures and organizations, because the idea would be is that you're not only going to prepare other people to take up leadership positions, but you have to help prepare other people to also behave in an inclusive manner. I don't know if you've ever worked with people like that. You're in a leadership position or a supervisory position, but you're working with people who are very close-minded. How do you go about helping those individuals to open up their perspectives to other people's other behaviors, other activities? That is a challenge that you're going to have to face, especially if the bureaucracy, or what we refer to here as the organizational culture, does not want that. Because one of the reasons why a lot of older organizations have problems is because they view control from the position of divide and rule. So what naturally occurs in a police station, for example, is position of rank, and rank creates divisions between people, and therefore being able to put people into different ranks is a method of control. But that control, or that system of control, becomes a barrier to trying to be inclusive in nature, because they will always tell you that, okay, when you reach your stripes and stuff, you can't go down the road and drink with the boys from the thing. You can't do this, you can't, there's all these things you can't do, and you can't do it with them. You have to align with those people who are in the similar levels to you. But the fact of the matter is that if you are more relational in your leadership practice, you're going to find that it doesn't matter if you go and you have a drink with the regular staff after, or the regular guys after you finish. I think I'm telling you to go there and drink and get drunk and be wrongly, but you're just going to have a drink and enjoy a few drinks with these guys, and think they're going to look at you as being more open to them, more inclusive of them, and when they have problems, which they eventually will have, they will come to you and ask for your advice. Again, it is not your job to your job is to understand people and help them to find the solutions they need themselves. Rooney.
Yes, so it has in some organizations where they will consider that to be fractionizing. It have senior officers that cannot and will not or will be chastised if they fractionize with officers junior to them in rank. Whereas in it might be a bit more flexible in the police service where that is something that is you look forward to because it's something they should do, So
but
I know for a fact in the military,
fraternizing between the ranks is but that's
between the ranks.
Right, and the reason for that is because it's control. Because if you create these artificial division of rank between individuals, they naturally begin to subdivide themselves. Remember, the majority of people in the organization are those are the lowest ranks, right? So that's the culture in the service that you're in, and that culture can evolve. Yes, Duncan.
Yes, question, does the divide and conquer theory work?
Yes, it does. To this day, it still works. I think we have the nature of our political system, it survives or thrives on that divide and rule. We create these artificial differences between people, and we are able to manipulate people into perceiving it as being significant and of importance, and therefore we don't vote for this party down here because that's the situation. But at the end of the day, it's artificial because it was placed upon us. There's no. I think I talked about this before, right? Any of you all ever found that video I ever told you to go and look at called The Illusion of Race? Any of you all ever looked for it? Maybe I didn't talk about it, but
I was about to tell you that because the first time I'm hearing about it.
All right, so race is a construct. It was constructed to justify a lot of negative things that happened in our history, and that construct was utilized to justify a lot of things, especially slavery. But it has been utilized, and the English are really good, or the British Empire was really good at creating these divisions between people, because the more divided you have the main population, the easier it is to manage them. And that divide and conquer is still active in today's environment, because we still look at people as being different. That's why religion keeps us apart, perceived ethnic backgrounds keep us apart, perceived job placement or social status keeps us apart, or gender keeps us apart. All of those things are utilized by the powers that be to maintain control over the vast majority of everybody in society. And that is the nature of how it works. Inclusivity is the opposite of that. It's trying to say that we as individuals are no different to anybody else. Yes, there are physical differences and so on, but at the end of the day, in the real sense, we're all very, very similar. We think differently, and your job as a leader is to try and understand why somebody might think that way. And half the times, it can be understood from listening to somebody and paying attention to their history and their background as to why they think and behave the way they do. All right. And we talked about this whole thing about dominant culture, and subcultures that exist in societies. Dominant cultures weren't always dominant. I just remember that. They were themselves a subculture that existed in societies that eventually emerged as being the dominant culture. So at some point in time, that dominant culture is going to fall away, and a different culture is going to come up. So the organizational culture or organizational behaviors that you all are dealing with now in terms of doing OB. You all are doing OB this semester, right?
Yes, sir, we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you all come
Yes,
across organizational culture yet?
Okay.
No, sir.
No, sir, we have touched on
Alright.
it.
So the strength of organizational structure is something that you have to deal with. And one of the things that you all face, particularly in trying to, implement things like relational leadership in your fields, is the strong organizational culture to like what Rooney was talking about in terms of things like breaking down those barriers. That's a really dominant culture that you're going to have to face when you go back out there if you want to behave in that manner. All right. Okay. So in addition to its practice, the language of inclusivity is exceptionally important. How do we talk to people in the organization? How do we refer to them? How does the organization, how the organizations is structured are indicated of inclusive environment. So if you look at your organization, right? So when you first arrive in an organization, in your organization, what's the name they call you? When you first come in?
Rookie.
Uh-huh.
Rookie.
Recruit.
Green.
Recruit, green. So we have all these names.
Green.
Again, you'd notice that it's highly structured. And that high structure is indicative of a highly exclusive nature, because you can't be with this group of individuals because you're not at that level yet. You follow? If you look at your organizational structure, you'd start to realize how rigid the structure is. And the more rigid the structure is, the less inclusive is the behaviors of people. So eventually what you find in organizations that have high levels of inclusivity, you find that the structure of that organization is broken down, that there doesn't seem to have this highly rigid hierarchy running through the organization. Yes, you have leaders, but those leaders operate in a fluid situation. All right. Think about the wordage we utilize when we're talking to other people. Oftentimes, everything is about I, and not we. All right. So the movement from the I to the we is a movement for more inclusiveness. All right. That is something that we have to pay attention to. If you, as a leader, you're speaking a lot and there's a lot of I this, I that, I the next, or you're speaking to other people and everything about them is I this and I that and I the next, and there's a heavy focus on that I phrase from those individuals, that means that the person might in fact be very self-focused, very selfish in nature, and that starts to tell you whether or not you want to engage in that person or not. Because if you're speaking to somebody and all they're talking about is I this and I that and I next, let me tell you something, and so on. So everything that they say is from their position and their point of view, then after a while, they're going to shut off because you don't feel as if you're engaging in a conversation that is two-way and inclusive in nature. You're engaging in a conversation that's very one-dimensional, and everything that this person has to say or you have to say as the leader is more important than anything that anybody else has to say. And that's not what you're trying to do. You have to create an environment where people are willing to share what they want to do. And to be able to do that, we have to stop using that I word. So
Sure, and
evaluate.
you know what is amazing? You know what's amazing about that is that some of those persons would have passed through custard, whether it's joint when it was joint staff or what it
I
is
don't
name now,
know.
No, you would know.
MGPS. I
Yeah,
don't
and
know what went on
MGPS.
in the joint staff thing, because this was a program that we developed when they came across the COSTAT, this particular course, and this course changed a little bit afterwards.
But it
So
had management and leadership training.
well, yes, but it might have been focused on different models. Because I know this model, we started using this text probably in 2010. So prior to that, 2010, 2012, yeah, around there. So made that adjustment in this program. But it's something to think about. But I understand. But again, it's a habit that people have to break, yeah, Rooney. That focal point of me, I am more important than everybody else. That is something that people have to actually work on to get past. All right. Okay, so we're talking about all these inclusive behavior. So another inclusive behavior is how we make decisions in groups. So one might think that voting is a good way to make group decisions. Now, how many of you all do that? You know, you have an impasse or there's a decision to be made. What you look for is a voting process. But a voting process is one in which you alienate other people who don't vote. So if you have a group of 10 people and 8 people vote for something and 2 people vote against it, in that group, you already have a division because that means 20% of your group does not agree with what the majority wants to get done. But they have no choice. They have to take that. But that puts them in a very uncomfortable situation because they have to go along with something they don't agree with. A stronger model or method to work with or to utilize is something called consensus building. It takes longer to get done, but in consensus building, what you do is you speak to the individuals who are having issues and problems to find out what their issues are and what adjustments or changes can be made to the decision to help to get their inclusivity involved with it. Now, it doesn't mean that they end up absolutely buying into the approach that you're utilizing, but they will be willing because they've understood why you've made this decision through consensus building, and they would then agree, even if they don't agree with it in totality, they will agree to work towards it or work towards getting this particular thing done in the manner in which you're working forward. This is something that has to find itself, or it should find, because you all work in groups all the time, both in the classroom situations, because almost all your classes require some group activity. But this is something that you all have to work in groups in the organizations you come from. And generally, consensus building is not something that's done. It's more dictatorial in nature. And that's even there's no even voting in that case, is there? The supervisors or your leaders make decisions and they roll that decision down. And they say you'll do X, Y, Z and that kind of stuff. Not so? Is that the case? Or am I wrong in making that assertion? Yes? No?
We comply and then we complain. Sometimes we just comply.
But yeah, again, the decision is outside of your thing. You just have to follow on. But it doesn't lend itself to any inclusive behavior, does it? All right. So that's something that maybe you can work on. I mean, it's really difficult though, because strategically, a lot of times, given the military nature of or the critical nature of your operations, there's some decisions that you kind of have to work with. I guess I'm assuming that there's some decisions you have to work with without having full knowledge of why you're doing certain things because you're not at that strategic level. But you have to trust that the person that's making those decisions is, has your best interest in mind, and that actually will only come up with experience going through situations with them. All right. Okay, so inclusivity also means that you have to pay attention to people outside of your organizations, which we refer to as stakeholders and shareholders. So anytime you're trying to make decisions and changes in organizations, especially significant change, you ought to check with the people who are affected by it, all right? So we have some people who have a share or interest in what you're doing, or a stake in the change that is being planned. So those people who are peripheral to the organization, they're not within the organization, but they are affected by, or will be affected by, the changes we're going to make. So for example, we have something in the college called program advisory committees, which are made up of a combination of shareholders and stakeholders. Now, the stakeholders really are, for example, employers. Employers are stakeholders in the activities of any college or university, because they are the ones who get the results. And this is from our mainstream training, of course. So those individuals out there are the recipients of the people we train. They have a stake, therefore, in making sure that the changes that we are making meets the requirements of the of their needs and wants for their organizations to also grow and develop. All right. Those people or those decisions, therefore, that we have to be able to include them in our decision making. So one of the things we utilize, or one technique that we utilize, is focus groups, where we get representation from all of these individuals. As I said, we have a program advisory committee where these individuals sit on a committee and they review our curriculum to be able to help make adjustments to the program that would be of importance to them, and they're aware of what's happening as it comes out and that type of stuff. So they should see and be able to get some sort of input into the developmental process. Again, it's about inclusivity and trying to bring in those individuals to let them have a say in terms of how things are being done, especially when you're making massive changes to your programs and stuff like that. And programs in the college here are reviewed every 5 years. So every 5 years, we go through the review process again with the program advisory committee to be able to look at. So for example, this MGPS program is under review at this point in time, and the stakeholders and shareholders are your employers, the ministries that are involved. All of those people have to be included in the process. Now, we would also do focus group meetings with past students and current students to see how they feel about the program and that kind of stuff. Have you ever participated in any of those focus groups, guys, in the past or in other circumstances? That's just one technique. You get questionnaires coming out there, people asking you to do surveys and stuff like that to review how they feel about certain things. Those are methods that are utilized to be able to include people external to the organization or the group, to get their input and get their type of things with it. It's important that leadership tries to do this, because you need to get input from the people who are at the other end of the process of utilizing these goods and services that we're producing, or the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So if you're in a social organization, you need to also look at the people outside of the group who are affected by what you're going to be doing, or who have a stake in what you're going to be doing. All right, regardless of what is happening and in the organization, you have to be able to build some sort of stakeholder involvement in the process. And additionally, what tends to happen, if you get stakeholders to support the change that you're making, then it's going to do well for you to be able to get coalitions going and get their support for you moving forward. It's kind of like what politicians tend to do. They get involved with their stakeholders and shareholders, get an idea, get buy-in from them, and therefore they get their support moving forward, even though they're not directly impacted by it. All right. So when you're looking at the responses that are likely to occur, you have, for example, degree of importance. So the issue or the changes that are taking place, you have to look at what is the level of importance to the stakeholder. as opposed to perspectives or stands, whether they're in high opposition to support. So if it's something that is of high importance to that group of individuals, and they are agnostic towards it, or antagonistic, not agnostic, antagonistic towards it, you have to pay attention, a greater amount of attention to that stakeholder and their issues, because it is of critical importance to them. And if they are having high levels of opposition to it, that is something you have to work on. Most times what you're trying to do is to get everybody in the area of high supportive areas. And that's your objective, to get high levels of support for either high items of high importance or low importance. You want high levels of support. But again, if some things are low priority, some things are problematic, that kind of stuff. So those are the categories you can find yourself pulling from, trying to evaluate the effectiveness or the reaction that these stakeholders are having. So you have to start to do some analysis with your stakeholders and see whether or not the issues that you're going to them with are of relatively high importance or low importance to them, and whether or not they have high opposition, high support. That then guides what you're going to be able to do. So this is actually from your textbook, so diagram for this analysis that's coming from your textbook in relation to that. All right, so now we move to empowerment.
So
And
before you
empowerment,
move on,
yeah.
Question though, that is something really hard to do because, okay, they send you on courses to be trained, you come back, you write your reports, and nothing gets done. Each
No,
and
but
every time.
you're not a stakeholder or a shareholder. You are inside the organization. So your report
Okay.
is really a reporting function. If it is, if it's a stakeholder or a shareholder whose opinions you're not holding there, and is you're not responding to, then that's at your own peril. But employees who are part of the organization, who go out and do training and whatnot and write reports and bring them back, you're already within the organization. What you feel is a sense of disconnection, as if what you're doing is unimportant to the organization. That is a different issue. All right, it doesn't lend itself to empowering you. It alienates you, in fact. Okay.
Correct.
So you're not a effective follower. You are an alienated follower. Interesting. Interesting analysis there, right? Okay, so empowerment is where we are encouraging people in the organization to take charge of different aspects and be more self-motivated towards getting involved and doing things in the organization. So empowerment has two dimensions: the sense of self that claims ownership and claims a place in the process and expects to be involved. So that's the first element. And two, a set of environmental conditions that promote the full involvement of participants by reducing the barriers that block the development of individual talent and involvement. So this is the two dimensions of empowerment. The people themselves in the organization, members of the organization, feeling that sense of empowerment themselves and wanting and expecting to be included, and the environment that the organization creates to promote that and encourage it. So what you described is a sense of self empowerment that you have, but the environmental conditions that govern the organization don't promote this type of activity of empowerment. That like what you just spoke to about them. All right. Empowerment is claimed. I have a legitimate right to be here and say what I feel and think, as well as share with others. You should be involved in this. That's the kind of empowerment I'm talking about. You have a legal right or legitimate right to be here and to feel the way you feel. And everybody else in the organization should be here and should be thinking the same way. Being empowered means mitigating aspects of environmental climates that can block meaningful involvement for others. So part of the other issue that comes up here is that strong empowerment supersedes the environmental blocks that or barriers that are created in organizations. And those organizations that encourage it would be more learning environments where the expectation is that people will take part in the running of the organization and will learn from failures and mistakes and successes as they occur. So it's important that the environment contributes to it, because without the environment contributing to it, it creates a sort of negative feedback, because people are trying to do and feel a high level of empowerment or wanting to take levels of empowerment, but the organization keeps blocking people from doing that. That's sort of like I've come across situations where people, take it upon themselves to go and do things and they get called up before the board or before some review board, and they said, no, you're not supposed to do that. Nobody tell you to go and do that, and all this kind of stuff, and you get a dressing down in front of everybody or even privately, and it's because the thing is not encouraging it. Yes.
Yes, sir. So that comes back to what we were speaking about earlier. That's why we work on instructions in some of our organizations. If you go and you jump the gun and you do something that you didn't get instructed to do, you might have to answer a question before some review committee or some senior or some group of people.
Correct. And that then hampers it. Kind of makes other people not want to seek those opportunities. So it has a negative impact upon empowerment throughout the organization. So now we could see the importance of empowerment and creating the environment for empowerment. Now there's a group that's going to present.
So before I go on to that, I just wanted to just add something to what and a certain for Taron that just said, because sometimes you say comply and complain or whatever, but that is not a school of thought that I'm totally in agreement with. And I'm not to be the devil's advocate, comply and complain.
Comply and complain?
Because if it's that instruction that is a lawful instruction, it's fine. But if it's not a lawful instruction and one that you know to your heart and body and soul, especially according to regulation and rules, is not one that is supposed to be, that is not a lawful instruction, then you put pen to paper. You put pen to paper stating, so we're just I know not all organizations, but I could talk about mine, right? As especially in TTPS, you put pen to paper, you're writing in the station diary or in your pocket diary or some other handbook. This instruction was given to me by this officer, name, rank, and whatever. And this instruction based on my based on regulation, so is not a lawful instruction. And you ask that officer to sign. If that officer refuses to sign that instruction that he gave you not being a lawful instruction, you're right now, the officer, I was asked to sign this instruction that was given to me and he refuses. You cover yourself. Because at the end of the day, if something to happen, you know that instruction, they're going to come back, didn't you know that instruction was not a lawful instruction to comply with? So when we go follow like sheep, that was back in the day. But you see, when we talk smart, well, you see, it goes on because people don't want to be empowered. What the word they don't want to be empowered. They don't want to have the knowledge. They don't want to know what is taking place. Right, but if you are in the know, they can't do that.
Let's assume that the instruction that you receive is within regulations, but there's a problem with the way in which it's going to be applied. Again, you have to follow the instructions given the nature of the way the organization is set up, how it runs. You have to follow those orders, regardless of whether or not you agree or not. That is where.
So don't get me wrong. It's not about not following the instruction. It's about making sure that you put into writing. Right,
no, but you're making the assumption. You're making, all right. So you're making the assumption that whatever the instructions you've received is somehow against one or some regulation. But I'm saying to you, there are situations. But you have to
know what the regulations is.
Right, but there are situations in which you're given an instruction that is quite within the regulations, but it is not it's not desirable to do at that point in time. Yes, Stacy.
Yeah.
I think Stacy was the person who brought it up.
So, long story short, once you could justify your actions, I
Uh-huh.
don't see what's the problem.
Yeah, but
And
that
I wouldn't
open.
even say that neither, because you see, it depends on the circumstances and the situation.
Well,
Because
right,
for example, and I like to use example because I have real lengthy service, 20-something years. And I could tell you, I remember at a time I had to go into Laventille. No, it's a lawful instruction. And I have to go in Laventille and remove a child from a home, right? It's alleged that the child is being abused. I have to remove the child from a home. Now, I am saying to the senior officer, I don't have a problem going with my team to remove the child from the home, but I want to be escorted by one of those garden emergency or some of those branches, because I am not equipped with the tools to go into those environments, because those are the environment that you don't know what could happen. A neighbor could see a police coming to remove a child from a home, and then something will happen. Now, I am scared. So if I am going in that environment, no, it's a lawful instruction, right?
Right.
But I am going in an environment where I would need support. I would need backup, right? So, and then you were hearing that you don't need that. So what am I supposed to do? So it depends on the circumstances. It has so much circumstances, so much examples. So when I hear
but
I
that's an
talk, I'm not
excellent one
talking
that you
because
brought
I
up
want
there.
to be, because I am
But
argumentative, or I just
yeah.
believe that when we're doing the right thing, we do it in a particular way, and but everybody must be comfortable at the end of the day. You don't put people in harm's way.
That you receive those orders almost like it was designed to set you up.
That is what it all boils down to. So that is where I remember making that complaint to a very senior officer who told me exactly what I would have mentioned earlier. You put into writing that instruction, right?
Yeah.
So that
Because the
is where it
context in
came
which it
from.
occurred was
Exactly. So
Right.
I know the organizations could be different, even sections within the service, but it has a lot of different examples that could be used, that it have things that you had to ensure that you cover yourself, otherwise you're going to put yourself in a lot of trouble or in danger.
Yes,
You know?
that's quite true.
All
Yeah.
right.
Personal
Thank you.
safety. Yeah. Stacy, you wanted to add something else?
No, so that was it.
Okay, see your hand still up. All right. Okay, so there is a presentation that a chapter on power and influence, and is going to deal with this. But I'm going to give you some initial information here in terms of the concept of power. So empowerment is based off of power, and understanding power dynamics is important for us to understand this whole issue of empowerment. Where possible, positional leaders must be willing to share their power or authority, and participants must be willing to assume more responsibility for the group's outcomes. Now, so empowerment is sharing of power, but you have to have the power to start with to be able to share as a leader. So positional leaders are encouraged to share their power. Now, traditionally, power is not something that is ever shared, and that is something that is traditional, because it's viewed as you either have it or you don't, and you don't give up any of your power. You you have to hold on to as much of that power as possible to maintain your position in the organization. All right. So because everybody, if you have power, it means somebody else doesn't. In truth, there are different types of powers that exist in organization. You have power. Well, let's look at the difference here. Power dynamics range from power over, which is the autocratic power that we're talking about, power with somebody, collaborative power, and powers alongside collegial power. That's when you're working with people who are of the same rank within an organization or considered at the same level. We have that collegial approach, or colleagues working together. So those are the different types of power existing concurrently in organizations. All right. Some people prefer to, as I said, hold on to their power, and the authority that power is something that they have to keep close to themselves, and this is something that empowerment is where you have to be able to give that power to other people. All right. Now, effective positional leaders know that their power and ability to be effective comes from the members of their group. So if you have power in an organization, your effectiveness is dependent upon other people doing what they're supposed to do. If they don't do what they're supposed to do, then you're not going to get it. And there are a whole host of different issues that come with that. Now, how persons use power and react to power is what we have to look at here. So there are five primary sources of power that exist. These bases of social power are expert power, referent power, legitimate power, coercive power, and reward power. Those are the sources of power. So expert power is obviously quite simply power that you get or earn because you are a professional in the field, you have a high level of expertise, and people look at you as being an expert, and people trust you to be that expert. All right, that's fairly straightforward. Referent power refers to the nature and strength of the relationship between two or more people, thinking of the individual as a wise senior. So this here speaks to an individual in the organization to whom other people defer a lot of respect towards because they have a lot of institutional knowledge and know-how. And it doesn't only speak to people who have tenure or length of time in the organization, but they are they have that sort of reference in the organization because people look at them from that perspective. So it's not only dependent upon the length of time that they've spent together, but also in terms of the amount of time they've served, not only time, but how people perceive them as being very knowledgeable and they have a great deal of know-how. Legitimate power is the power that you have based upon the position that you're given or you've earned in the organization. So therefore, you're the manager, you're the supervisor, whatever. But the problem with that type of legitimate power is that it's a very fragile type of power because if you abuse that, you're going to lose that power. You have coercive power. This is the power in which you utilize punishments and punitive sanctions or the removal of rewards and benefits to force people into doing things that they're supposed to do. And unfortunately, this is a type of power that is oftentimes used in certain circumstances, but it's probably the worst type of power to exercise in organizations, especially if you're looking for trying to make things better in the thing. Reward power is like the opposite of that. That is an individual in the organization who has the ability to give rewards to people like bonuses and that type of stuff. And it can be both intrinsic and extrinsic. So intrinsic would be things like intangible praise and support, or you can have extrinsic, as I said, promotions, raises, plaques, special privileges, those kind of things. So those reward power is the opposite of coercive power, but can also be negative in nature in that the removal of a reward is the opposite type of coercive type of thing. So again, they're two sides of the same coin. And those things give you power in the organization. Problem with that is how well you're going to how well are you going to use that power? Because you can, in fact, hurt yourself if you use power, especially in context of a situation where somebody's afraid of you. And this happens in a lot of organizations where, for whatever reason, some people look upon people with power with some level of fear. And fear is also related to referent power. You're fearful of looking stupid in front of them. You're fearful of making some sort of comment that is negative in nature, and therefore you'll get buffed by it or something along those lines. That fear factor is something that, as a leader, you have to be aware that when people are treating with leaders, there is some form of fear that exists to the position, not necessarily the individual. Here we're talking about the position. So you get called to the principal office when you're a student. There's some level of fear, or the dean's office, or you get called to the commissioner. Those things, I mean, it might be purely innocent, and they call you there to talk to you about something or ask your opinion on something. But there's some degree of anxiousness that comes to being called to a meeting of that nature and called to that type of stuff. It's human nature, especially when somebody is called before somebody who supposedly has a thing. But what you have to do as a leader is understand that there is this natural fear that comes with people, and you have to work at diminishing the amount of fear, because that is going to prove useless to you in terms of trying to get somebody to open up to you and give you fair analysis of what's going on. Because people who are fearful often either exaggerate or refuse to communicate because they're in that circumstance or that situation. So you have to pay attention to that as a leader. Now, when you're giving power over or you're empowering other people, you are trying to ensure that you're giving people a fair chance to have their say. It doesn't mean that you're going to just make all the decisions and what you say goes. That is one of the privileges of having power. What you say goes, but it doesn't have to be brought across like that. You have to find an avenue of bringing that, making those decisions, and getting people involved in making those decisions, so they feel as if, hey, I'm part of that decision-making process. Now, another way in which you can find yourself getting power is that you can get power that you don't actually have. That's power attributed to a person because we assume skills or we assume something about that individual that is not necessarily true. So I like this example here that the text gave. You are given the power of being the best writer in your class or in your group because you are an English major, and that is an error. It could be an error. I mean, they could be better at writing reports and stuff like that, but it doesn't automatically track that because you are doing an English major that you're a better writer than everybody else. That it doesn't necessarily track that way. All right, so that's where another form of getting power comes up. So you can be attributed power that you don't have. Now, power is not finite. And indeed, it can be shared and amplified. So a lot of people view power as being, there's only a certain amount and I have to control all of it. And the relational leadership process says, no, that's not the case. There's an infinite amount of power, and that power can be shared, and we can, giving you power, it gives me more power. So that's the kind of thing as a leader you have to realize, that when you give power over to somebody else, it empowers them to do things and then empowers you as well and gives you further boosts across the board. So those are things that are very important that you want to pay attention to. Conventional leadership paradigms sees sharing power as a negative thing. It's seen as you avoiding your responsibilities and being indecisive, and handing over these, giving your power is seen as being a bad thing. That's not a good position or attitude to have. Other people observe that power, when the power is shared with people, you give over the responsibility. Now, that's something that you have to be wary of. If you share power, you delegate tasks to other people. It doesn't get, you don't give the power over to them. That is something that oftentimes happens. That's sort of like what Bruni was talking about. She was given an instruction, but she wasn't given all the tools and power to get all of the resources necessary to accomplish the job. So when you do something like that, you give that person the power, but you don't provide the resources. That's a form of cheating. The person with power is actually setting up the other person for failure, and that behavior by leaders generates a great deal of resentment and distrust. People will not trust you because you are purposely setting people up by giving them tasks to do without the power necessary to call down the resources necessary for it. And that's something that's often done in organizations by authority people who use power to punish other people. They kind of give you what they call rope to hang yourself. But really and truly, what they're doing is they're giving you an opportunity to do something under the guise of setting you up to fail. And when you do things like that type of stuff, you see, hoarding power in leadership risks negative responses from others, such as sabotage, withdrawal, resistance, anger, and other behaviors that will contradict the positive goals and objectives of the group. So you negated the empowerment process by doing things like that. And obviously, they also hand off the responsibility for the failure onto the individual in question. And that in itself is another issue, because ultimately, if you are in charge of a division of organization and something goes wrong, the responsibility lies with the leader of that organization, not with the officers who were acting on your instruction. And that is something that a lot of leaders here duck their responsibility and try and blame everybody else, and that's something that politicians are really, really good at, that nonsense of laying blame on other people and indicating to them that is how they go about doing things. And that is an absolute you know, you have the power to make the decision. Things go wrong, and you push the responsibility onto somebody else. And that somebody else, you know, was really somebody who does not or did not have the power to be able to do that. Any of that type of activity is going to negate against self-empowerment. It creates an environment that is not trustworthy. People are not going to want to work with you because they don't trust you. And you're going to create a level of alienation that in organizations, most people are just going to disengage. So there's no sense of commitment to the organization and moving it forward. So those types of negative things is what you need to be trying to avoid, because it's kind of like what goes on there. All right, so if 6 methods of trying to do empowerment, educating. So empowerment through discovery, sharing information and knowledge, that is one method. Leading, you know, taking up leadership objectives, and that way you can try to emphasize, trying to utilize power. Structuring, which is creating the structural situations in which you can empower other people to be able to take charge of the circumstances and situation. Providing the resources necessary to get done what they're doing. Mentoring people in order to help them to realize their potentials. And of course, actualizing it, which is taking on being self-empowered and claiming it. So acting from that manner and actually doing it. Valuing empowerment of all members creates a larger group of participants or citizens who generally take more ownership of group tasks and processes, and who feel committed to the outcome of change. Now, this empowerment, therefore, you know, kind of sets up more people to get the job done. And more importantly, more people who will take more responsibility to moving the ideas and concepts forward. This is important because what you're doing is creating the next level of leadership that is going to take place. All right. And more importantly, you're moving people into the situation where they feel as if their behavior, their actions, and their level of interaction in the organization matters. So mattering and marginaling or marginalization is something that we have to pay attention to. Empowerment creates the feeling of it matters, that what I do matters, that it is of importance to the organization. But if you feel as if your actions are no longer contributing to what's going on, you are pushed to the margins of the organization and you feel as if what you're doing is of no value, you are marginalized. You want to make sure as a leader that you make people feel as if what they do and how they're doing things, it matters, and you don't marginalize them. That's really important because mattering is a feeling that we are significant to others and to the process. Think of the anxiety, perhaps marginalization of potential new members coming to their first meeting of every group. So you want to avoid or reduce the amount of marginalization that takes place in your organization and make people feel as if what they do and how they do things matters to everybody. Groups and organizations or environments can promote mattering or can keep people on the peripherals and the margins. So that's another thing. The environment itself has to be set up so it doesn't in itself marginalize people. And as you all have described to me, it appears as if the Ministry of National Security is set up in such a way that the environment does not encourage empowerment. And therefore, oftentimes people feel marginalized by the decisions that are taken and made. And you feel kind of ignored by everybody in the system. That does not bode well. It means that there's a lot of place for positive change to take place in that organization. So we can see the importance of empowerment because empowerment is going to create a situation where the next group of leaders is going to emerge from these individuals. And it's important because the next group of leaders will have a different set of skills, and that organizational dynamic is important. And you have to be able to support those changes that are taking place by empowering the new people coming in to want to take those positions up. It just can't be because you want rank and you want the pension and that kind of stuff. It has to be that people feel some level of commitment to the purpose of the organization. Through that empowerment, it is going to create more momentum moving forward. Part of like why things go wrong in the public sectors because a lot of people they don't even know the purpose and function of their organization. They're not committed to it. There's a whole set of marginalization that's taking place, so people don't feel the need to be empowered and take any, because at the end of the day, I have to look after my family, and I just need my salary to be able to do that. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why a lot of officers have been accused of having second and third jobs to be able to do that, because the pay scale also describes a circumstance in which people feel as if they are marginalized by the government and by the whole structure of what things are doing. So, and that's something that we have to pay attention to. Empowerment and delegation. We spoke about this before. The dangers of delegating without transfer of power is results in participants in that process feeling manipulated, unprepared, resentful, and victimized. Those are things you ought not to be doing as somebody who's involved in empowerment activities. So we can't say enough about empowerment because it is the next group of leaders, or the natural movement of leaders coming in can only be developed through empowerment, by sharing that power and decision-making behaviors and getting people accustomed. You can't be a leader if you've never had the opportunity to try some sort of leadership activity. All right, that brings us to the ethical values. Now we're running out of time here, so I'm gonna have to push a little faster. So we know what this ethical thing is all about. It's about the values and principles that govern your behavior as an individual. And it means that this model emphasizes heavily the ethical aspect of leadership. Now, you all are doing a course in ethics. So I don't need to go through the elements of what is ethics and where ethics comes from, because you all have done that in something else. But what we want to establish here is how critical this model takes on ethics as a core value in this model. All right, so let me get that beyond the philosophy. So the philosophy of this leadership programs is values driven. Our definition underscores this by saying leadership is a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. Leaders and followers act out of a sense of shared values, the desire to cause real change and commitment to mutual purposes. And it's really critically important that we have shared values. Now, values are things that we choose freely, right? So that's what Lewis says here. And they become the principles that guide our behaviors, both in our personal and social lives, right? That's what Kusa and Posner says. Simply stated, values are personal beliefs. Now, you all would be doing this in ethics. So the issues is that leaders ought to be upright, honest, and ethical in their behavior. Unfortunately, most of our leaders don't seem to exhibit any of these qualities, or just a few of these qualities, and sometimes it's just it appears to be very convenient in nature. And a lot of the previous programs of leadership would always speak about leadership being values neutral or values driven. Now, most of the old programs speak to leadership as being values neutral. Why? Because values are subjective. To a great extent, values are subjective because they are the goals that or the structures in which a society is the sort of the values that we hold in society, and they change over time. And if you set up your leadership being values neutral, then if there are shifts and changes, then you're likely not to have too much issues. But if you're values driven and there are changes in values taking place in society, then you can expect some sort of crisis taking place in the organization as a result of those movements. Now, we know that values have changed, will change slowly over time. Sometimes they change very rapidly. But generally, values and ethical values and morals don't really change that rapidly. There's some basic international or basic concepts in ethical values that tend to hold very steady through life. What is good, what is bad, that type of stuff. This topic is so important that there are two presentations on this. One from the DAFT and one from the Exploring Leadership. We're going to be seeing that. All right. Now, the concept really here is that we expect that values are going to drive the behaviors of the organization through the leadership. All right. Leadership that is by word and deed ethical and moral. That's the nature of what we're hoping this thing to do will be doing. So the relational leadership model sits upon the fact that we are expecting that everybody behaves in a moral manner, high levels of ethical values. And the expectation is not only for the leadership to behave in that way, but also that the leadership requires that behavior from the membership, and the membership then demands it of the leadership. So it's a symbiotic relationship. We are both expecting everybody in the organization to behave in an ethical manner across the board. So it's not that only the leaders are expected to behave in this manner and everybody else could do what they want. It is a mutual sets of behaviors that we are expecting people to be doing. So levels of hypocrisy have to be looked at. Those things have to hold to that very high standard level. So I think everybody kind of gets the idea that, well, what they're talking about here. So there's a lot of stuff they talk about and discuss in this section on the nature of leadership and moral values and how they tend to impact upon things. So I'm just kind of running through some of these. Right, so all of this is things. So as an exercise, one of the things that you can do answer these questions is what do you stand for? And how far are you willing to go to advance that value or those things in your life? All right, or to do the right things. How far are you willing to go to get those things you want? And will it be something that's good as opposed to something that's bad? All right. So of course, when it comes to leading and in this particular manner, in an ethical way, obviously the best way to do this is to lead by example. Because leading by example sets the standard, sets the approach that we can deal with. Because how we behave will speak more to the people around us than what we say to them and what we write about and that kind of stuff. So Waldo Emerson here says, "What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say." So walk the talk. If you do that, then it's great. There's a great likelihood that as a leader, you would inspire the people to behave in an ethical way. All right. So this is something here. The task of leading by example is not an easy one because most leaders begin with the goals of wanting to do the right thing, but they get derailed by peer pressure by the people around them. And this can happen both in the form of individuals in the organization or the bureaucracy in the organization, or the temptation to trade leading for common good with leading for personal gain or uncommon good. So again, these are the challenges that as a leader, you're going to step into. Let's say any of you here run for office and you find yourself winning your position. And these are the challenges you're going to face. You're going to come across a situation where your peers will encourage you to do the wrong things. And there will be constant temptation for you to look towards awarding contracts or whatever it is within your power to be able to move yourself forward, because we see that peer pressure taking place in others in senior positions in the government, or what appears to be that, and it if we look at the example that we see coming from all these people, that's the kind of behavior that you're talking about. So it's easy to say, but it's really going to be difficult to be able to do this. So it borrows some aspects of the authentic leadership model that we talked about before, that we looked at as being thing, but it speaks to really attempting really and giving a good effort to trying to get your ethical values to be high enough or authentic. It doesn't mean that you're going to always do the right things. I mean, but when you do break your promises, ethical values and standards, it's difficult to get yourself back. You know, as they always say, it's easy to, well, integrity is something that is hard got but easy to lose, because all you have to do is just do one thing and everybody knows about it, but it's a really hard thing to rebuild your integrity if you have done something to break that down. Leading with integrity is not a neat and tidy process. It probably is the driving force that allows leaders to continue in their capacity. So the thing about it is that your integrity is the only thing that you have. And you have to protect that, you know, without question, you have to protect that, because once your integrity is doubted and comes into doubt, it creates a serious uphill battle for anybody to take you seriously as a leader in the future. All right, so that brings us to the concept of relational leadership is about a process. And the reason why we keep on talking about this as the leadership, everything that we're talking about there is going to be that in order for it to be a repeatable activity, it has to be process driven. Everything that we do to be ethical, to be inclusive, to be purpose driven has to be process driven. So process refers to how the group goes about being a group, remaining a group, and accomplishing the group's purposes. It refers to the recruitment and involvement of members, how the group makes decisions, how the group handles the task related to its missions and vision. Everything is process oriented. How do we do what? So like in your vision and mission statement, every group has a process. Every process can be described, and processes must be intentional and not incidental. And the reason why we want them intentional is because you need to know how you're going to accomplish this time and time again, which is why everything is process driven. Everything is about doing it and doing it well and being able to get repeated successful outcomes from it time and time again. All right, so this is the whole concept of everything being process oriented. And this is all the things. When groups design and implement ethical, inclusive, empowering processes that further a shared purpose, they can trust that the processes will take them through difficult times, resolve ambiguous tasks, and be assured that together they will be better than they might be individually. So again, these processes guard against things falling apart. It guards against, this is one of the reasons why, for example, if you think about the this is why they're trying to bring this thing on, the process of buying goods and services, procurement processes. Why is there a process set up? It is to avoid unethical behaviors, stealing, to avoid both from the point of view of the people within the organization, but also from outside of the organization who are trying to take advantage of government contracts and trying to buy their way into a contract with the government. Those are the kind of things that happens. And this is the kind of peer pressure that you're going to face as a leader. You're going to be in a position of power. You have to get some goods and services supplied by you, and you have the ability to sign a document giving these people the contract to do it, because then the government picks up the process based upon the approval of the committee that they will do this. And you find yourself in a situation where somebody comes to you, hey, if we do that, we could organize some things on the side. Nobody needs to know what's, and you're selling yourself short. Right? That's why you have to put things into process, because the process should help guard against these types of things happening. All right? To be empowering and being inclusive. Again, process. Process is where you're going to set up the systems to be able to be inclusive in your behavior and inclusive in the methodologies that you utilize in terms of selecting employees or selecting membership, and that you're going to be also process oriented in your empowerment process. So when people come into the organization, they have to go through an indoctrination program. Of course, they have to buy into the goals of the organization. So they have to go through that as a process, the indoctrination program. And in that indoctrination program, they're told they'll be exposed to empowerment training, and you offer to these individuals at various times opportunities to take on further responsibilities, and in fact maybe pick up training next time, and that kind of stuff. Those are the kind of things that when you set them down as a repeatable process, they create scenarios in which you have repetition available, and it safeguards you from when things change, like resolves ambiguous things, ambiguous tasks, or if there are difficult issues that are taking place, it helps guide you through those processes. Too often, processes devalue the people involved by being highly controlled, valuing winning at all costs, excluding or shutting out those who have an interest in change, or expecting everyone to think and act alike. So these are the kind of things that break down processes. Attending to the process means being thoughtful and conscious of how the group is going about its business and thus avoid errors and omissions. So these are all the things about the process that we have to pay attention. We live in a process-oriented world, and we have to be more careful to the progress which we create our plans and intentions. We need to see these plans, standards, organizational charts, not as objects to complete, but as processes that enable a group to keep clarified on its intentions, strengthen its connection to the new people and the new information. So again, a lot of us, when we come into organize, so I know, for example, as a teacher, every semester we have to redo our lesson plans, redo our course schedules. And a lot of people look at this as just make work kind of behavior. But the reality is that these are processes that we engage in to make sure that we are reconnecting with the objectives of the organization. That when we put it out, the new people that come to my class, they are aware of where we're going, how we're going, what we're doing, and we get new information flowing in. So if we don't do these things, it means that we are not process oriented. All right. Okay. And of course, these processes include collaboration, reflection, feedback, civil confrontation, community building, and a level of profound understanding, which is called meaning making, right? So these are activities that we need to engage in to help make the process oriented, the methodologies that we use, right? So one of the key ones that they talk about here is reflection. And we have to be, aware of a lot of things, but that area is it's important that we spend some time and evaluate things without just running off and getting things done, because if we run off, we gonna get lost in the activities. Why do we do things this way, and how could we be more effective? Those are questions we have to ask. So even the process that we're putting in place, we need to be paying attention and reflecting about the efficiency of the processes that we're putting in place. Is it actually getting the goals that we want done? Or is there a better way we can do it? Or are we doing the right thing to begin with? All right. Cooperation and collaboration. So a lot of people see competition as being the superior concept of working with other people, so that you set up a competitive situation and we expect that the cream will rise to the top, so to speak. And we set up very what we call adversarial systems. All right, so we see an adversarial legal system, sports teams are adversarial in nature. The free market or the market system is competitive in nature. Even our political system is adversarial in nature. But the research tells us that cooperation is superior to competition in promoting and achieving productivity. It further distinguishes that strong benefits of cooperation in the internal functioning of the group from the incentives when competing with other external groups. Now, It means, therefore, that research is telling us that cooperation and collaboration are better methods or processes to utilize to help build the organization rather than setting up competitions in the organization, because that lends itself to cheating. It lends itself to sabotaging other people because of the way in which it kind of can find itself going on that. So that's something that happens a lot because winning at all costs is a dangerous concept. Whereas if we all win together, we all complete the exercises together, we all collectively, inclusively find ourselves in successful situations, and not one person being successful and the rest being unsuccessful. That actually is not a healthy position to be in. That's not how life works. All right. So again, so rather than competition, the process requires that we take it, we involve ourselves in collaboration and cooperation. All right. Because as I said again, if one person is winning, then everybody else is losing, and that zero-sum type of activity is not a good thing. So I like this from Con here. The simplest way to understand why competition generally does not promote excellence is to realize that trying to do well and trying to beat others are two different things. A person's best work is done under conditions of support and cooperation, not under fear, anxiety, or coercion. That is actually quite true in relation to that. So these are the base principles in terms of utilizing. So you're going to focus your process not on competitive processes, but cooperation and collaboration type purposes that we're going to share what we're doing, how we're doing it, and we're going to be doing joint activities. We're going to be using consensus building, trying to bring in and involve and empower all the people, inclusiveness, because competition leaves everybody else out. Collaboration will try and pull things together. Those are the kind of things that will help from a process point of view, hold within the guidelines of the organization. All right, now it's after 2 already, so let me kind of take us to the key areas. You all can go through this last section in the thing here. Let me just take you all down to, this is probably one of the more key areas of process. Process is best developed when we reflect and contemplate on what took place in the past. It's a really important part of the process that ought to be happening. Reflection means stepping back from what is going on and asking what is happening, why is it happening, what does it mean, what does it mean for me, and what can I learn from it? Now, the question I want to ask really is, and you don't have to answer it now, is that when is the last time you were able to reflect on your life? Now, generally, people tend to do reflections, New Year's and that kind of stuff. But I am talking about really systematically thinking through what you've been doing, how you've been doing things, and asking questions like this and working forward. You have to be able to do this as a leader, and you have to encourage the people in your organization to engage in this reflective process, because the reflective process, and it's not just sitting and thinking, is you actually have to sit down and write and gather data to be able to, capture what you've been doing in order to be able to make meaning moving forward. That's really important. Most of the times we get caught up in the day-to-day drama of what's happening, and we don't take the time to necessarily do some internal reflection and look back on what's going on, because without looking back, we can repeat the mistakes we made in the past and forget the successes we've had in the past. Because not only do we need to look at what we did wrong, but we also have to look at what we did right to make sure we get those things going on. All right. So this area, I think you all can go through by yourselves. Now, at the end of the day, the leadership skills that this model is talking about requires time to achieve. And what I would like you all to do is to go through it. And as you all start to do your presentations, you're going to see the different elements that we've been talking about here coming up in more detail in the chapters that you all are going to present. But the idea is to provide an opportunity for you to see a leadership process that is different to what we may have experienced in the past and what we may be experiencing currently. And ask yourself, which one do you think would work better for you? All right. And trying to be, open your mind up to be more inclusive in your behavior and think about the natural barriers that we have that we've created for ourselves in relation to sport. Now, you don't need to memorize all this stuff, right? This is a long chapter. There are lots of things to be going through here. You can go through the text, pull out the critical issues, read about it. I would encourage you to go through these things on your own. Look at the slides by yourself and try and understand it. Go back to the textbook, look at what it has to say there, read it in the context of that. You don't need to memorize these things because everything's there. It doesn't make sense for you to try and memorize things. There are no tests. So there's no exam, so to speak. True test is life. So anybody that has any questions they want to ask? I know I left out a little bit coming down to the end there, but do you have any questions you want to ask? No, if not. All right, so everybody's still here. Did anybody else? Sorry, let me just check the register. Did Hansen make it in? Samsudar or Samuch? No? Just clearing up my record keeping. All right, if there are no questions, I know it's after 2, so I'd like to bid you all farewell. I will post the new things, but next week we expect presentations 1 and 2 from Sterling, Thomas and Waldron, and Gera, Ramlal, Jairam, and Ali. How are you all preparing? Chapters 4 and chapters 5, understanding self, understanding others. How's that coming along, guys? No response, Sterling? Hi, Sterling?
Well, I certainly was going to say something, so I didn't
Well,
say anything. So we're coming
It's
along
in the
fine.
works. It's in the works. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so you're getting there. All right. Gera, Ms. Ramlal?
So we coming along. I just wanted to see in that your presentation is like 100 slides. So how much so we are expected to
Well, first
submit
off, your
about?
chapters are not, first off, I must say, your chapters are not as long as mine. Secondly, you don't need to put in as much detail as mine's. Oh, wait, let me stop well, let me leave it. Yeah, you don't need to put in as much as mine's because mine's is not designed as a presentation aid. It's more designed as a standalone. It means that you could go through the slides yourself and not necessarily have to go and read the chapter. All right, because a lot of the details are right there. Yours can be more picturesque, make sure you cover all the content from the chapter, and that's the main thing. Because remember the marks, it's 60% on content, 25% on your presentation skills, and 15% on citation. So just make sure you get those. But no, you don't have to be that long or lengthy. Because the vast majority of wording you can actually present rather than have it up on a slide. All right, but just make sure you do enough slides that you feel comfortable you've covered all the content. That's the most critical thing. My slides had to be more detailed because initially when I started to do this course, the presentations were utilized as a replacement for the chapters themselves reading. All right. Okay, so
Okay,
any other
sir,
questions
thank
from
you.
that group? No problem. Further, if you have questions you want to ask, you all could always contact me and we could have a chat. All right. Well, looking forward to seeing you all next week.
So just one thing before you go, sir. I seen two groups have to present on chapter 6.
No, it's two different chapter 6s. It's a chapter 6 from the Exploring Leadership and a chapter 6 from the DAFT.
Okay, all right.
It's two different chapter 6s. Anywhere you see DAFT in commas, that means it's the change in text.
Okay, all right, understood.
All right, you understand it now? All right, let me stop the recording.